While everybody is talking about the State of the Union, also the fact of the Republican response, which was absolutely horrendous, what have you missed? There's three things that you have missed because our focus has been completely on the fact that can Biden even get through it, and the fact that we should have, someone else do the Republican response, probably Trump, being that he is the opposition. But I digress. While you watch that, let me talk about three things that is unbelievable that we have missed just the last 2 or 3 days. And it affects you so much. I know I say that, but this is literally completely and utterly affecting you. Let's jump into it. Today's video starts now. Hey guys, welcome to the Max. Thank you so very much for being here today. If you are new to the channel, go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell, give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down, that's okay. But let us know what you think about this content in the chat below. The comments help us as a group to actually build wisdom, to make sure that we're understanding every aspect of this. That way we can get a good conversation going. It helps us be wiser and make sure we're getting all the information we can. So now let's discuss what we're talking about here. State of the Union, they probably went as good or as bad as what you probably have already thought. A lot of these things are just publicity stunts for both sides. I personally just don't even watch them anymore. They're just a bunch of talking heads, and they get us nowhere. Now, three things that we missed while this was going on. First story deals with the underfunding and the liability of government assistance. Now, this is things you had to pay into, Medicare and Social Security. Now, listen to this. This should be a doomsday warning. Listen, U.S. unfunded Social Security and Medicare liability hits 175.3, what do you think, million? No. Billion? Oh, that's a lot of money. No. $1 trillion. $1 trillion. The unfunded liability that's supposed to be there for you to basically pay into this Ponzi scheme to retire on or to have extra supplemental income or supplemental insurance with is unfunded. 175.3 trillion with a T. Now, when we start seeing that many zeros and hear billions, millions, trillions, we all just fade out because, to be honest with you, we're just trying to get a paycheck of $2,000 or $3,000, hopefully, for a month or for 2 months. But you see, when the government touches things, it doesn't work. So the more that you hear both sides say, well, we need to fund this, we need to regulate this, we need to cover this, we need to help fix this, reform this. All they're doing is just controlling you. If you're paying into a system and you're not doing anything else for retirement, you're not building any other business for retirement, do you realize you will be at the beck and call of the government because they can't even fund their own Social Security and Medicare? What if all of a sudden you needed a knee surgery at 65 years old? You're healthy. It's not like you're unhealthy. It's not like you're older. But they're saying, well, you know what? We just don't have the funds. You're not 40 anymore, so I don't know if we're going to help you. You don't believe those conversations will happen in a socialized medicine sense? That's exactly what Medicare and Social Security is. Social Security. Listen to it. See, this is the part that's, let's boil the frog very slowly where he won't know. You are buying into a system that is complete socialism. You're buying into a social situation where you're having to pay something for some other individual to ultimately see the government not actually fund it and basically be paying in a broke system to destroy our way of life as we get older. If Social Security and Medicare is underfunded by $175 trillion, why are we sending an extra trillion omnibus bill across the president's desk? Why are we sending extra billions to Ukraine when we can't even fund our own citizens? I know this sounds like this is kindergarten, elementary talk here, but it really is. I think what our leadership does is they think our dollar is so strong and they think America is so strong because of our war efforts and our defense is so strong that we can just keep on faking this money situation. One day it's going to catch up and we're not going to be able to dig ourselves out of the hole, and there's going to be a lot of needy people on the road begging for help from its government, and it can't anymore. You see those wheelbarrows of cash where, like in these third world countries, where they roll up with literally thousands of dollars to buy a loaf of bread. because it's worthless. That's exactly what we are seeing. We're seeing a foreshadowing of that when we see the unfunded liability of Medicare and Social Security while we're still paying into it. We're paying into a broke system that's not going to work. And what's so crazy is because the interest rates are up, the inflation's up, it's even going to get worse. Now, they're going to want to keep those inflation numbers down because guess what? They're legally having to pay into the system more and give you a raise on your Social Security and coverage with Medicare if the inflation goes up. So that's why they change those CPI numbers. That's why they always manipulate that number to make you feel like you're not paying as much on inflation, which you are. They just got to keep that number down so they don't have to pay all these extra Social Security benefits. They're rigging the system and you are buying into socialism. So I'm challenging you. You have to look for other ways to make sure you are building up money in retirement age. As you get older, make sure you're getting out of debt and doing those things. Now, this brings up the second story. It blows my mind. There's another story on Zero Hedge. Again, while we're focused on the State of the Union, it says there are 5 charts the FDIC does not want you to pay attention to. Now, if you remember the bank crisis and the fact these banks are struggling, there's another major community bank that went down this last week, but it says bad banks are rising. We have grown from 8 to 52 just in the last few weeks. Just in the last few weeks. The total assets held of those firms went from 12.8 of liability lost to 66.3 billion. So it more than 5 times its loss. So we talk about unfunded coverage of Social Security and Medicare, and then on top of that, we have the FDIC, who is not strong enough to actually pay these underfunded banks. These banks are struggling. What that does is 2 things happens. The bank struggles, these local bank struggles, these small bank struggles, the FDIC is not strong enough, so they give a fire sale deal, cover the liability, and let big banks buy them, people like JP Morgan Chase. So it is, again, socializing the fact of your money system to where there is just a few big banks. The community banks are struggling. That's one thing they don't want to let you see is the fact that these banks are falling. You know why? Because their delinquency of credit cards. Credit card delinquency is at an all-time high. You know what else? Mortgage delinquency. So we're going to see a housing crisis, which is going to cause more problems for these banks. That's what people don't realize. A lot of these banks, because they're not actually financially strong, especially these smaller banks and these community banks or regional banks, even though I tell you to bank local, very local, make sure you're banking in a bank that actually has assets and has value. Fractional lending and the way that they've built this system completely on debt, it works great in a very good system or a good economy. This shows that the economy stinks because when people can't afford things, they can't afford their debts. They can't afford their debts. They're spending more on credit cards. They become delinquent on their mortgage, delinquent on their credit cards, delinquent on their auto loans. Who does that hurt? Of course, the consumer, but it hurts the small bank. The banks have lent out money, and all of a sudden now they can't fulfill their depositors who are needing their own money. That fractional lending, again, that's been allowed and regulated by our own government, has now caused the fall of these smaller banks. So now you see the government system is failing, the local and small and community banks are failing. We have to look towards big banks to help, and then the liability is pushed upon the government. The government can't afford any more liability. You heard about the $175 trillion unfunded liability. It's a 6-cycle carousel that basically we're all going to get thrown off this carousel and be reeling and have nothing to show for it other than a failed nation. That's why I'm so passionate about these congressmen and these lobbyists and these non-governmental agencies, the non-elected bodies that are spending the money that we don't have, all in efforts to fix a border of somebody else that we don't even know. I bet you 60 or 70% of Americans can't even find Ukraine on the map, can't even find Taiwan on the map, or especially can't find Guyana on the map. But we want to send money over there because it pulls out our heartstrings. We have no money. I love helping people. I do. I love being able to help someone if they're in need. If it's to pay their bills or to help them out or buy them a lunch or buy them a meal to provide Christmas for some family. We love doing that as a family. And here's the problem. If I don't have the finances to do that for my own family, if I don't have my own bills paid, how do you think I can go help someone else? That's exactly what the government's doing. We don't have the money to take care of our own people, but then we're making false money to take care of all these other situations, and that's making our banks fail, our consumers fall, and of course our government fail. Last thing I want to talk about. While again, we were focused on the State of the Union and this election for 2024, which is a huge deal. But what happened prior to the 2020 lockdowns? They war gamed, they thought through a pandemic situation years before it actually happened. Bill Gates admitted to it. They did it in Israel. They did it with the Israel Mossad. CIA was involved. Everybody was involved with that. They kind of planned and kind of sought, how would we fix this situation? How would we work through this? Well, guess what? Now Europe is alarming a lot of people because they're beginning to war game what would happen in a food crisis. So they're war gaming a food crisis. Does that mean a food crisis is coming? Well, when all of a sudden they're at war against their own farmers, war against the milk, war against the dairy industry, war against the meat industry and the cattle industry, I could see why we would fall into a food crisis. Now, that's in Europe, and the people are like, oh, well, that has nothing to do with us. Remember, we're in a global food market now. America depends on still foods coming in. We shouldn't. We should be able to sustain what we have here. However, you'd be surprised how much Canada and Asia and Mexico and South America gives food to Americans to sustain. A lot of our food system is still global. So if all of a sudden we have panic buying and we have problems with shortages across the world because we're starting to see food crises across the world, so now Europe is saying, wait, we need to kind of game plan this and see what would happen in that case. Well, therefore, again, I tell you to take care of your own system and food system here, because if you don't have a localized food system, you're going to be dependent on the same system. Well, you saw how good they did in the last pandemic. You saw how good they did in the last 2020 war game situation where they planned out this thing and all of a sudden it did not work. People lost jobs. People are still struggling from a 4-year ago pandemic. And now they're war gaming something that could even be more catastrophic because it affects more people because it's food. Think of your metropolitan cities. We talked about New York City the other day. New York City produces less than 1%. It's like 0 point something percent of their food. Meaning less than 1% of all those millions of people in New York have a local food system. So if a food crisis happens, the cities will be sent reeling. Now they're saying it's because of export problems. They're saying because of harvest failures. They're saying because of fertilizer failures. Unrest in the streets bring into panic buying and shortages. Anger towards the corporations, so people are trying to move away from buying from these big places. All that matters. But it's basically going to cause a ripple effect in our food system, especially when the war of the West is on the local farmers. You see this is happening in the Netherlands. You see this is happening across Europe. You're starting to see that in America where the war is on the trucker and the farmer. Well, the trucker and farmer is how you get your food. So while we're focused on Biden and how much mess-ups he has and the Republican response and how comatose it was and how it didn't give anything other than establishment talking points, we're missing out on the fact that our banks are failing, our food system is failing, and the fact that the government can't even fund its own retirement plan that is making you buy into in the socialist process. So you know how to solve all this? You build your own food system local. You work on a community way of building a garden or working with a local farmer, and you support them no matter how much it costs. If you can depend on that farmer or that local food system, you have fixed it. You take your money out and you say, you know what, I know we got to keep some money in the bank. I know that. I'm not stupid. But you find a strong local bank. Most local banks will tell you if they're strong or not. If they try to hide their numbers, then that's probably not a bank that you would want to bank with. And if they're tied to so much government intervention and so much bailouts, then I wouldn't do business with them. Also, buying things like gold, buying things like food, buying things that are tangible assets and bartering goods is phenomenal. I've got tons of playlists on that. Now, you can't help paying into a system of the Social Security and Medicare. I think it's a joke, and I believe that if true conservatives and libertarians became in leadership, they'd find a buyout option to where if you're 30 or under, you could opt out of that, start a new program, and hopefully the government would help fund the obligations that it supposedly had. But you know what that means? That means you have to focus on America first policies and not Ukraine first, Mexico first, or South American first, or European first, or any other policies that our governments are doing. Last night he talked the State of the Union. He talked more about Ukraine and the safety of Ukraine more than our own southern border. I didn't hear anything about the southern border. Did you? We are literally watching America burn all because our leadership is focused on everything else and not actually what is the problem. We pay people to go to Washington to make more regulations, to make more laws to contain us, instead of actually working to free us from all this obligation and regulation. All the while, they can't even fix their own system. We are literally like the Titanic, and we just move seats around on the Titanic, but we're still going to see a sinking ship because we're not doing anything to actually fix it. I go back to Argentina and El Salvador. Not that they're perfect, by no means, but they're actually seeing the problem and they're resetting it themselves. Not the reset that the globalists are pushing, but a policy of their own people saying, you know what, we gotta have change. If we don't have change, they're gonna make change happen, and that change we won't like. We need revitalization and revival and a reset that way. We do not need the globalists to step in any more than they already have. Help us do that by getting closer to these issues and gaining more wisdom and common sense to see what's best for you and your family. Thank you guys for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this content. Our goal is not to scare you. Our goal is not to give you fear. Our goal is to say, you know what, while you are watching this, there's actually other things happening that you need to pay attention to. And when you do that, it helps you be more prepared, more sustainable, and find ways to take care of your family. Guys, thank you so much for watching. God bless. Happy homesteading, y'all.